Hi, and welcome to another game replay with Rigel B. My name is Rigel, and today we'll be taking a look at my Round 7 matchup from a recent Star City Games tournament. If you need to catch up with the previous rounds, or if you're unfamiliar with the Naya Sky deck, you can take a look at my deck tech or the previous rounds in the Naya Sky playlist, which is also where you'll be able to find all the future rounds for this tournament. And to catch all my videos as they come out, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. As these tournaments are played with open deck lists, I'm going to give you the opportunity to take a look at my opponent's deck first. As you can see, we're playing against mono white aggro this round. Okay, wish me luck. Okay, we're here battling against mono white aggro this round. My experience from the ladder is that this has been a pretty favorable matchup, but this list has a few differences that could give me some troubles. Looking at our opening hand here, this is a fairly clear mulligan. There's just not enough going on. The things in this list that could give us troubles, there's a one of Shadow Spear in the main deck, which can give their creatures trampling and lifelink. And the reason that this has been favorable on the ladder is that I just go wide enough that I can chump block all their threats. Their ideas are that they'll play a creature, play Luminarch Ascendant, grow it up, throw them all of the Skyclaves on it, and just beat down with that. But if I have something like a Clarion Spirit, as you see in this hand, and I can generate tokens to chump block with, that makes it pretty easy for me to survive. And they don't have a lot of removal to deal with my threats of Edgewall Innkeeper and Clarion Spirit. They have 3 main deck Skyclave Apparition and 1 Kabir Takedown. So here, looking at this opening hand, it looks pretty good. I have to decide what to put back. And I think it's either going to be just Barra Sentinel or it's tricky, but yeah, it's tricky because I'd like to go turn 1 just Barra Sentinel and then draw a white source, go turn 2 Clarion Spirit into Edgewall Innkeeper or something like that. But I think I'm lining up my plays here. I don't like to play Kabir Takedown as land, but in this particular hand, I think I'm going to have to do that. And then I'm planning on running out Spirit turn 2, as there's no way for them to kill it on their turn 2. And then the following turn, I should be able to Bone Crusher Giant plus Edgewall Innkeeper, or something else depending on what I draw. So yeah, they have the one of Shadow Spear. They also have 2 Stone Coil Serpents in their main deck, which also have trample. So basically, that's the type of things that could make this game a little bit different, is that normally I can just chump block their threats, but if they get a trampling threat and can grow it up with a Luminarch Ascendant, maybe they'll have a chance. Another thing that you have to look out for is their Elseid of Life's Bounty, as that can, if they give a flyer protection from white, I won't be able to chump block it with my spirit tokens. So that's another way that they might be able to force through the damage. But if they can't force through the damage, I'm going to take over the game pretty easily because I have lots of sources of card advantage in my deck and my opponent does not. I have the 4 Showdown of the Scalds, 4 Toski, 4 Edgewall Innkeeper. So I'm going to be able to overwhelm the game pretty easily as long as I can chump block their threats. And the Giant Killer really shines in this matchup as well, as that's going to be an avenue for me to tap down anything that they have equipped. Or say the Stone Coil Serpent. I obviously would like to be able to get the first half value out of it, but they don't have a ton of things in their deck that are 4 power on their own. They'd have to either grow something with Luminarch Ascendant or Aspirant, or they'd have to equip something before I could get that target with Giant Killer. So I decided to go ahead and double spell here with Edgewall Innkeeper and a Giant Killer, as opposed to using the Bone Crusher Giant. I was trying to save the Bone Crusher Giant in case they had an Aspirant and I could use it to kill that. But they go ahead with another Hollow Blade. And these Hollow Blades, I'm going to start blocking them as early as possible. Just start whittling down their hand. Once their hand is gone, the Hollow Blades are not nearly as threatening. So I'm just fine trading tokens for cards in their hand. knowing that those cards in hand will be useful to them eventually, even if they're just discarding land now. Alright, so we get to Showdown of the Scalds, which is pretty great, as it's just going to refill our hand and start growing our creatures. It does mean that we'll likely have to take a couple hits here from Hollow Blades, as I don't think I want to block with any of these creatures. Alright, so we get to... next turn, we're going to get to decide between this Bone Crusher Giant or a Showdown of the Scalds, depending on which one we think is going to be more useful. And in general, I'd lean towards the Showdown of the Scalds, especially with not having as much gas in my hand right now. If I had a hand that was chock full of stuff, then maybe I'd feel like the leaning towards the Bone Crusher Giant is more useful. And the Bone Crusher Giant's also going to be able to draw a card off of the Innkeeper, but... So here they negate any of my decision making by playing a Redain, so I don't have the option of Showdown of Scalds anymore, as it costs 2 more. So now it's pretty clearly going to be a Bone Crusher Giant, and I'll just do both halves of the Bone Crusher Giant in order to double spell for Clarion Spirit, draw off of Edgewall Innkeeper. And the Stomp here is just going to make them discard a card. Like I said, I'm just trying to whittle down the cards in their hand, and then these Hollow Blades are pretty anemic creatures once that happens. Now, as far as where I'm growing, I'm going to basically grow this creature up so that it can start attacking. I don't necessarily want to put all my eggs in one basket, but if I wanted to grow the Innkeeper, I'd have to put 2 counters on it before it could attack, and then I wouldn't be able to attack with this Clarion Spirit, so I'd only be getting in for 3. So I think it's good to grow the Clarion Spirit, and then grow it again, as it'll be the only creature that can attack, so then I'll be getting in for 4. So I'm just maximizing the damage that I can get in for this turn by putting both the counters on it. Yeah, and then we're going to get a Clarion Spirit, which is great because each one of these Clarion Spirits can basically hold back a Hollow Blade, considering that they're going to run out of cards soon. We get in for 4 here. The Redain's a little bit annoying because I didn't get to cast my Showdown of the Scalds, but it's alright. At this point, with 2 more adventure creatures in hand, I think that I should have enough gas to carry this game, and I'm going to get more Showdown triggers next turn. If they do manage a removal spell here, they have to decide between Clarion Spirit and Innkeeper. They'll probably go for the Clarion Spirit, and then I'll get to draw off of these adventure creatures that I have in hand. Okay, Sword of the Realms. So this is the artifact equipment side of Halvar. It's not looking too impressive on this board, and in particular, I don't necessarily think that they should have put it on the Seasoned Howlblade. I don't mind going ahead and blocking that Howlblade with a Spirit here, basically just wasting a bunch of their mana. They used 2 mana to play the sword, 2 mana to equip it, and now with this simple chump block, it's going to send their Seasoned Howlblade back to hand, which if they want to recast it is going to be another 2 mana. Maybe they'll just leave it in hand as a card to discard to the other Howlblade, or something like that. But their turn was not that productive. The Sword of the Realms could provide problems for me when it combines with an Elsied, so that they could equip an Elsied, give a creature protection from whatever color they need, get the Elsied back in hand, relay the Elsied, sack it to give a creature protection from whatever. It's a way to allow them to alpha strike if they have a lethal attacker. They can make it so that it can attack through all of my blockers, basically, by giving it protection from each of the colors. Okay, so here we draw a Lovestruck Beast, another adventure creature. We get to go ahead and keep growing. And I decide to grow the Clarion Spirit up to a 6/6 so they can't double block it with their 2 creatures. And they decide to throw in the towel here. They've seen enough. Okay, so looking at the sideboarding here, sideboard is it's another reason why I feel like this particular list could give me some troubles. They have the 3 Drannith Magistrate in their sideboard, which are really good against me, as it'll shut down half of my adventure creatures, and then the Showdown and the Scalds are all gonna have difficulties. They have Archon of Emeria, which they could bring in, which prevents people from casting more than 1 spell a turn, which it's really important for this deck in particular to be able to cast multiple spells a turn, because none of my spells are all that impactful on themselves. I'm really about overwhelming in card advantage and swarming the board. And if I can only deploy 1 thing a turn, that's really not going to be a pathway to victory for me. As far as cards that I get to bring in, I have this Archon of Absolution, which is here specifically for this matchup. I only have 1 of it in the sideboard because mono white aggro has not been that prevalent on the ladder and in recent tournaments, so I only have the 1, but it's really great in this matchup. And then I have the Run Afoul, which can be able to get a Redain or an Archon of Myria or anything that they equip with the Maul of the Skyclaves. Other cards in their sideboard, they also have another Shadow Spear that they could bring in if they want. So while the matchup feels pretty good, they definitely have some stuff in their sideboard that could cause me problems, and I don't have a lot of answers for, like, if they land a Drannith Magistrate, I really only have the Kabira takedowns that can hit it. And seeing as how their deck runs 4 Selfless Savior and 4 Elsiad of Life's Bounty, that's not a reliable game plan for dealing with that. And so you saw on the sideboarding that I left in all 4 Showdown and cut 1 Toski. And maybe that's backwards. Maybe I shouldn't be with them having 3 Drannith Magistrates that can shut down my Showdown and Scalds, and me not necessarily being able to remove the Drannith Magistrate from the board. Maybe I shouldn't have 4 Showdown in my deck, but it's such a good card otherwise that I decided to leave it. This hand, you know, it's got some issues in the land department, but otherwise it's got a lot of really great cards for the matchup. First of all, this Clarion Spirit is an excellent card in the matchup, and then the Archon of Absolution is really dominant in the matchup, as well as the Lovestruck Beast just being effective, and the Toski here to draw cards in combination with the Clarion Spirit, and the Giant Killer being able to tap down anything that's equipped of theirs. So all the cards in my hand are excellent, and so even though I could have stumbled on lands, I think it's worthwhile to keep this hand. And even though I just talked about how important this Kabira takedown is in order to kill that Drannith Magistrate, I think I'm likely going to have to play it for a land in this hand. I go ahead and delay it a little bit, as I'll just fetch green this turn so I can go Lovestruck Beast. I'm not necessarily going to run out of turn 2 Clarion Spirit in this situation. When I'm on the draw, they can answer it cleanly with a Skyclave Apparition on their turn. And they also had the possibility of bringing in Glass Casket. There were 3 or 4 Glass Casket in their sideboard that they can also bring in. So they have a lot more removal in their deck that they have access to post sideboard. And so I might want to slow roll this Clarion Spirit a little bit. And so here I go ahead and play the takedown as land. I'm going to need it for a white source, and play out the Heart's Desire. This is going to set me up well to next turn go Clarion Spirit into Edgewall and Keeper and start creating an army. or I could just go Lovestruck Beast to sort of brick wall or ground assault, stem the bleeding a little bit. Even though I don't get a draw off of the Edgewall Innkeeper by playing out the Lovestruck Beast, it would protect my most valuable creatures a little bit longer in case they have a Glass Casket or Skyclave Apparition. The Clarion Spirit, the Edgewall Innkeeper, the Toski, these are all cards that are going to be more valuable than the Lovestruck Beast in the long run. And so I could run out the Lovestruck Beast here, basically because it will hold back their team, and if they have removal, they'll end up using it there instead of on a more valuable creature. So here the 1/1's not going to be able to block, so we're going to go ahead and get an attack with it. Just get in 1 damage. They do have a combination of cards here that could start to pose me a little bit of difficulties. The Shadow Spear, like I said, can make it so that it's difficult to race them, as well as allow it so that I can't really chump block. And with the Luminarch Aspirant growing their team, the Shadow Spear could become a bit of a problem. So here they do Glass Casket, the Lovestruck Beast. We're not too concerned with that, but we will have to be concerned a little bit in the future with the Aspirant combined with the Shadow Spear. So we're already down to 13. It's getting a little bit, feeling a little bit of the heat. So I have some options here. I could go Toski and just draw a card off of my token. And that would provide me a blocker for one of their creatures, whichever one they don't equip with the Shadow Spear. Or I could play the Archon of Absolution, making it pretty difficult for them to attack this next turn, as any creature they want to attack with, they're going to have to pay 1 mana for, and they're a little bit constrained. They may not have infinite mana to work with. And they can only get an attack here if they grow a creature and equip it with Shadow Spear in order to get through my Archon of Absolution. Here they play a Redain, and then they grow their Aspirant. They're just protecting their Aspirant from a Bone Crusher Giant. That's why they put that one counter there. Otherwise, they'd probably put it on Redain and start growing Redain as quickly as possible, because Redain is actually going to pose a bit of a problem here. As they start growing Redain and they equip it with Shadow Spear, that's going to be able to trample through my Archon of Absolution, and they're going to be able to protect it with this Alseid of Life's Bounty. So whereas I may want to, if they grow it up, I could Giant Killer it normally. They already have the protection on the battlefield, so if they just leave up 1 mana, my Giant Killer is not going to be able to hit that. So that Redain's going to pose a bit of a problem, and I have to start thinking about how I'm going to handle it. And if they end up leaving up protection for it, it's going to be pretty difficult. I only have the 1 Run Afoul that I brought in from the sideboard in my deck that could cleanly answer that Redain, even through all of their protection. And so with that in mind, I'm going to start drawing cards. It's possible that I should have just left the Archon back in order to save life this turn. If they didn't have a land drop last turn, and if they don't have a land drop again, they can't very well equip the Redain and attack with it, because that would tap them out. So they wouldn't have protection up with Alseid. So they may, if I leave the Archon of Absolution back, they may not have gotten an attack in with their Redain, and so I'd be saving more life this turn than I might in the future by leaving Archon of Absolution back. But like I said, I wanted to start drawing cards as quickly as possible, trying to dig for that Run Afoul, because that Run Afoul is going to be my only long-term solution. Another thought that I could have is I could run out this giant killer just as a creature, thinking that it's not very likely that it's going to be able to use its first half. And then as a creature, I can use it to tap down their main attacker. It's not necessarily a long-term solution, as once they get the creature to where it could be lethal, then they could use their Alseid to protect their creature. When I go to tap it down, I activate my giant killer to tap down the creature, and they use Alseid to give it protection from white. And so once they have a lethal attacker in the Redain plus Shadow Spear plus Luminarch Aspirant tokens or counters onto the Redain, then they're going to be able to attack through that threat by using the Alseid. It's possible that if I leave up mana in addition to having the giant killer out there and its activation cost, if I still have mana up, they might not go for the Alseid, thinking that I could have another removal spell in the form of a giant killer. And so that could potentially be an answer, just having the threat of a giant killer in hand when I go for that. But it does require leaving up a lot of mana every turn. I would need to leave up 2 for the giant killer, and then 3 to represent a chop down. So that'd be 5 mana that I'd have to leave up in order to prevent them from getting a lethal attack in. So I don't think that's a long-term plan. And instead, I'm going to try and keep drawing cards. It's actually tricky whether or not I want to be drawing cards or trying to prevent damage with my Archon of Absolution. And I think it is most useful for me to draw cards. Here you see me not attack with it. I think that's a mistake. I was trying to think in terms of what can buy me extra turns. Knowing that at some point in the future, they can use their Alseid to make it so that nothing can block their Redain. They can give it pro white if I'm tapped out and they don't have to worry about a removal spell. And so getting some blocks in to gain life before they make that play can buy me extra turns. But depending on what I do with those extra turns, it's possible that just drawing the card right away was better, as that is almost the same as buying an extra turn. But it is true that my extra turns could result in more extra cards. So if leaving it back as a blocker does actually net me an extra turn on the race, that could be more valuable than the immediate card. And so it was definitely a tricky decision. And the math of figuring out when I should be attacking and drawing a card with it and when I should be blocking to absorb 2 damage, it's difficult. And so as you saw last turn, I did decide to leave it back on defense, because I know that at some point in the future it won't be able to absorb that 2 life because they're Alseid there. And along a similar line of thinking that at some point in the future they can give it pro white and I won't be able to block with any of these flyers, I decided to go ahead and throw the Clarion Spirit token in here as a blocker as well, just to absorb the 1 damage. I feel like every life point could be crucial in terms of buying me time. And knowing that I won't necessarily get the opportunity to gain life with these creatures in the future incentivizes me to go ahead and block with it as soon as possible. So after this, I'll be at 8 life, and next turn they can grow their Redain up to a 7-powered creature, or a 6-powered creature. It'd be 7 if they have another Luminarch Aspirant. But I know that they won't be able to get a lethal attack in, even if they give it protection from white so that it attacks through my blockers. Okay, having drawn another Clarion Spirit as well as Showdown on Scalds last turn. Showdown on Scalds, it's expensive, but like I said, that run afoul is my only clean answer. And so I've decided to really prioritize digging as much as possible at this point in order to try and find that run afoul. I only have one of it in the deck, but I don't think that there's another game plan I have that's going to be successful here. Like I said, the game plan of running out the Giant Killer and then leaving up 5 mana every turn just isn't a successful game plan. So we're going to go ahead and start digging. And then also the Showdown of the Scalds trigger, the counters that it can start spreading around could enable me to buy an extra turn just by having some more chump blockers. You saw me get a Jaspera Sentinel off of this Showdown, and that gives me 2 different colored creatures that I can block this Redain with. Now I have white and green, but with the Redain having trample, that's not enough. I need to have enough toughness in both white and green that I could chump block. I'm basically thinking about their Elsiad giving their Redain protection from a single color and then being able to attack for lethal. And so at this point, with the second Aspirant, they can grow it to 7 toughness or 7 power. So if they're not giving it protection this turn, I can block with my white creatures to save 3 life. So that'd be I'd basically be taking 4 damage at that point, taking me down to 3. And then I would need a lot of toughness on both white and green in order to survive the next turn. But maybe it's possible with these Showdown triggers. I didn't have enough time to calculate it all, but I thought that the Showdown might be able to give me an extra turn in that regard as well. So again, here we're definitely blocking with the Absolution to gain 2 life. The question is, do I throw any other creatures in there? And considering that they may not be able to gain life in the future, I go ahead and throw it in there now. I don't throw in the Jaspera Sentinel now along the same thinking because I have the possibility of giving it +1/+1 counters, so it could potentially gain more life next turn. And if I don't see another path to victory, it's possible that I just want to grow the Jaspera Sentinel up big enough that it can survive. So next turn, their Redain is going to be 9 powered, which means that I'm going to have to block 6 of it. So if I could get this Jaspera Sentinel to 6 toughness and leave up enough removal or enough mana to represent removal, then they may not sacrifice the Elsiad, giving it pro green and attack through for the win. So, but as far as getting it to 6 toughness, that's casting 4 spells. If I want to cast 4 spells and then also leave up, I would have to leave up at least 2 mana in order to represent Kabir Takedown. If I leave up 1 mana, there's nothing I could have except for Run Afoul. And so I would have to cast 4 spells. Right now, after laying a land, I would have access to 8 mana, including the Jaspera Sentinel. No, 9 mana, including the Jaspera Sentinel. So casting 4 spells and then leaving up 2 mana, I'd have to cast 4 spells and 7. I may not have enough cheap spells. I guess that'd be 2 and 2 and 2 and 1. So it is a line that might be able to buy me an extra turn. What you see here, what I'm doing here instead is I'm attacking with the Archon of Absolution in order to draw another card. As again, I'm just trying to dig for that Run Afoul, as I think that that's the only real path to victory. And so, yeah, I can decide here between, I can basically try to cast enough spells to get this just Bear Sentinel big enough, and then leave up mana is my plan for surviving this next turn. Otherwise, they can just go Elsied, give their Redain pro green, and attack for the win. So we're going to try and cast as many spells as possible and grow that up to as big toughness as we can. And then try to leave up, if we can afford to leave up the 3 mana for this giant killer, that's best. I guess if we can't afford that, we have to decide between leaving up 2 mana as a bluff for Kabir takedown, or if I run out this, Oh, so here the line I actually end up taking, I use this giant killer to just get through their Selfless Savior, and then I'm going to cast it in order to draw another card this turn. And maybe this is the wrong approach. Maybe it would have been better for me to have just... Oh, I guess yeah, that's right. The fact that they had this Selfless Savior in play meant that the lines of growing the Jaspera Sentinel and leaving up mana for removal wasn't an adequate game plan. As they would be able to just go ahead and use the Elsied to give the Redain pro green, and then they wouldn't have to worry about my removal because they had the Selfless Savior. Yeah, so I forgot that was what they had there, and that wasn't going to be a game plan. So I did actually need to just keep drawing cards trying to get to this run-afoul, and because we're the luckiest people in the world, we did draw our run-afoul, the only card that could have saved us in this situation. So they go ahead and play a Skyclave Apparition. We hold off on using the run-afoul, waiting for them to put their Luminarch Aspirant tokens, and I was thinking that they would use their Elsied to give their Redain pro green to attack through the Jaspera Sentinel. So I was hoping that they would have to sacrifice their Elsied pre-combat, and so I'd get a lot of value out of this run-afoul. But as it was, they had an Aspirant for my Sentinel, and they didn't have to use their Elsied. So they still have the Elsied, which is going to cause us problems in the future. But we're still alive. We had this run-afoul, and they used their Apparition on a Sentinel when there were plenty of targets that might have been more compelling. The Toski, the Clarion Spirits, the Giant Killer. These are all things that are going to be impactful on this game. And so the fact that they used that Apparition on the Sentinel could be pretty valuable for us. And now now that we've dealt with their flying threat, we have a lot more creatures that can block to help us survive, one of their creatures being equipped with Shadow Spear. And we get to just start drawing some cards with the showdown. It's also going to enable us to start growing some of our creatures so that we can... They're at 37 life, and we do have to kill them at some point. So growing some creatures to be able to deal more damage. If all my creatures are only doing a couple damage at a time, it's going to be difficult for me to win without decking first, because I have this Toski out there. And so every time a creature connects for damage, I'm going to draw a card, which, you know, in general is great, but as you make your way through the rest of the deck, if they have 40 life and all I have is 1/1s, I'm going to deck before I can kill them. So we're going to have to start growing some of our creatures and hitting for bigger chunks. But in the meantime, I'm going to try and get enough card advantage to feel a bit more secure. And I'm going to try and leave up... if I could deal with this Elsiad, then my giant killer is going to be much more useful, as it'll be able to tap down whatever they have equipped. So you might just see me use this Bone Crusher Giant to target the Elsiad. Knowing that they can just sacrifice it in response, I won't get to lay the creature half of Bone Crusher Giant, but I don't think I'm too concerned about losing out on the creature or the card advantage of drawing off a Edgewall Innkeeper. I think it's much more important for me to get that Elsiad off the battlefield before they can start doing some shenanigans. Like if they draw Sword of the Realms and combine it with Elsiad, that could pose me problems. And so I think it's important to get that Elsiad off the battlefield. Another thing that they could draw to give me problems would be Lurrus. If they draw Lurrus, they could start bringing back the Elsiads. Because as you'll see right now, I only have white and green creatures out there. So if they could use 2 Elsiads when I'm tapped out, they could go protection from green and then protection from white, and then attack for lethal. So that's what we're trying to avoid by getting that Elsiad off the battlefield right away. Let's see. If we are running up against it as far as decking before we can deal enough damage to them, another thought, I don't know if we have another, we might have one more Shepherd of the Flock in my deck. And so at some point when we draw the last Shepherd of the Flock, I could use that to bounce my Toski before making an Alpha Strike if I need to avoid decking. We'll see if that situation comes up. As it is, I'm just going to start growing some big creatures. So here they did have another Elsiad, so it's a good thing that we were able to Bone Crusher Giant on our turn, as otherwise the 2 Elsiads might have been able to combine to make a lethal attacker here. And here it looks like they've grown an Aspirant and then equipped it, and it looks like they're going to attack. If they do attack like this, I will throw enough creatures in front of it to kill it, forcing them to use the Elsiad to protect it. Yeah, so they're going to go ahead, and it looks like they have to pay for the Archon of Absolution. And then, yeah, they go ahead and use this Elsiad proactively to make me to just force me to chump block with my green creatures and take me down to 1. I guess they're thinking maybe they'll be able to sneak in this last point of damage. I don't know that was the most useful use of their Elsiad, but I can see the appeal of forcing me to chump with those and then getting me down to 1. But I don't know. I guess they felt like I'd have better blocks in the future, and so they wouldn't have that opportunity to get in as much damage. Okay, so now we have a giant killer up that can tap down whatever they have equipped, which is nice. And they have no more protection, so at this point, any removal that we draw can do some good work. So I'm going to go ahead and try to draw a bunch of cards here, as well as get in a big chunk of damage. If at all possible, I'd like to be able to kill them next turn. So I'm trying to get an attack in that's going to provide enough damage that I could probably lethal them next turn. But I don't want to leave myself completely shields down either. I do have this giant killer, which goes a long ways to providing me safety. But if they do have another Elsiad, I don't want to be stuck in a situation where I'm using my giant killer to tap whatever they have equipped with the Shadow Spear, and then they use the Elsiad to give some other creature pro-white, and I don't have any blockers of the other color or something to that effect. So I want to make sure that I have blockers of both colors. As it is, I draw a giant killer, which is excellent as it means I get to deal with the big Luminarch Ascendant right now. And I think it'll be useful to get another giant killer out there. If I have multiple giant killers on the battlefield that can all tap creatures, then it's gonna become increasingly more difficult for them to get through for lethal. And it's also going to become increasingly more difficult for them to survive the next turn, as I can tap down blockers. One thing you'll have noticed there is with the showdown trigger, I briefly looked at my Archon of Absolution, which is an issue that I've run into in the past. This is something I've noticed is obviously Archon of Absolution has pro white. It means that you can't ever grow it with your showdown on the Scalds. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing this matchup. You're never going to be able to grow that Archon of Absolution with showdown on the Scalds triggers. Okay, so I've used all the mana that I want to use while leaving up 2 for Giant Killer. And then I have to make some discards. And I figure that it's safe to discard a bunch of these card advantage, the extra Toskies and the showdown on the Scalds, as my main threat at this point might be decking before I can kill them. So, but it's looking pretty good with my ability to grow some big threats and tap down their blockers. I have a pretty overwhelming board state. I have tons of cards in hand and more mana to work with. Even though I'm at 1 life, I think it's pretty difficult for them to assemble a situation here where they can win. If they had Maul of the Skyclaves to get a flyer, like I said, we have the Giant Killer to tap it down. So they would have to have Maul of the Skyclaves and Alciad, and then they'd also have to have enough mana to use it all. And then also equip with the Shadow Spear. So all of a sudden that'd be a lot of mana that they'd have to have. They'd have to have 1 to lay the Alciad, 3 to lay the Maul, 2 to equip the Showdown or the Shadow Spear, and 1 to sacrifice the Alciad, and then 1 to also attack with the Archon of Absolution. So there's no way that they had enough mana for that. Here they do, they lay Valkmira, the second half of Verdane, and I make a bit of a mistake by not tapping one of their creatures in response. So then my tap was countered by the protection that the Valkmira provides. I should have tapped in response. But as it is, we're still going to be able to accumulate lethal here. We have the 2 Giant Killers that can tap down 2 of their blockers. That's going to take 6 of my mana. So then I just need to get to 17 damage with the creatures that actually provide damage here, because the Valkmira prevents any of my 1-powered creatures from dealing damage. So I'm just growing a couple of big creatures here by playing as many cheap spells as I can. Knowing that I can get up to 17 damage even after the protection from Valkmira. And so just have to make sure that I have enough mana to tap both of their blockers. And with them only having 1 mana up, there's nothing that they can have in their list that will interact with me here. So now it's just a matter of going through the motion, playing all my cheap spells, and then using the last 6 mana to tap both blockers. And now you can see that our 2 big creatures are at 8 and 7. So that's it's really 7 and 6 after the 1 life that's prevented by Valkmira. So that's 13 damage, and then we'll get 2 more from the Archon of Absolution, that's 15. And then I have a Shepherd of the Flock over here that provides 2 more. That'll get me to 17. And then I also have some 2-powered creatures that'll take me even further. So we do actually manage to add up to 17. And all that's left is tapping down their blockers. So yeah, this has been a pretty crazy game. I thought there was no way that I was going to win, and then we finally got to that run afoul. And that run afoul saved our game. And as you'll notice, we're on 1 life. So all those turns where we chump blocked with the Clarion Spirit token, just to save 1 life, ended up being extremely valuable. And we do in fact manage to get this game. What a wild game. But there we go. And now we're sitting at 7-0. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that you'll join me for the next round. To find all the rounds for this tournament, you can check out my Naya playlist. And to catch all my videos as they come out, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. I really appreciate the support. Okay, see you next time.